Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about 4 methods that you can use to measure if you are gaining muscle or losing body fat. These are definitely 2 of the most popular goals of anyone that works out. And if you want to see if you're on the right track, or if you're a coach that wants to assess his client's progress, then you need some reliable strategies to do so. Now, there are a ton of different methods out there, but most of them aren't really accurate or are only used in a laboratory setting, like for instance an MRI. So with all that out of the way, we're going to start with method 1, which is to measure your body weight. Now, your weight will naturally fluctuate between days due to changes in water weight and food content in your gut, so it's important not to put too much stock into daily body weight changes. However, by taking a weekly average of at least 3 weigh-ins, this will greatly increase the accuracy of this method. And over time, if you're losing fat or building muscle, then you should see significant changes in your scale weight. I'd advise you to weigh yourself daily, as this will further increase the accuracy of this method, and it will also build a habit so you won't forget doing so. To weigh yourself, just place your scale on a hard and flat surface and always weigh yourself in the same condition. So after waking up and going to the toilet, either naked or in your underwear, and then just simply write down the weight, and at the end of the week you just calculate the weekly average. And so if your goal is fat loss, I would recommend you lose about 0.5% to 1% of body weight on average per week. So if you weigh 100 kilos, then that would be between half a kilo and a kilo per week. Just keep in mind that at the beginning of a fat loss phase, you will lose a little bit more weight than that, due to losing some water, some glycogen, and also having less food in your gut. For muscle gain, however, that is a slower process than losing body fat. So you want to be a little bit more conservative with how much weight you're gaining. Otherwise, a lot of it will just be body fat that you would have to diet off later anyway. So shoot for about 1 to 2% of body weight per month. So if you're more experienced, I would probably advise you to stick a little bit more to that 1% per month. And if you're a beginner, then you can get away with gaining about 2% per month. So again, if you weigh 100 kilos, that would mean per month, not per week, but per month, you want to gain about 1 to 2 kilos. And if you aren't gaining or losing body weight at the appropriate rate for about 2 weeks, then I would say you should modify your calorie intake and your calorie expenditure, which I'll make another video about where I'll explain exactly how to do so. The one exception to that rule would be if you're a female and you notice that during your menstrual cycle, you tend to hold on to a lot of water weight. In that case, I would probably advise you to assess everything from month to month, just to make sure that you're not making any unnecessary changes. One caveat I would have for that method is if you're someone who has a negative relationship with the scale, and seeing a number on the scale can either make or break your day. In that case, I would probably avoid this method and use some kind of alternative method. But I do find if you explain to people that daily changes in weight don't really come down to seeing significant changes in body fat or muscle mass, and are mostly either food content in your gut or some kind of water weight, then that does tend to relieve some of that anxiety. The next assessment tool you should be using is your gym performance, which basically means your rep strength should be increasing if you're trying to gain muscle, and should at least be maintained if you're in a calorie deficit. So are you either doing more reps with the same weight, or are you doing the same weight for more reps? Now, resistance training does produce a lot of adaptations that make you gain strength, but if you're using the same exercise over a longer period of time, and you're still making gains in your strength in the 5 to 30 rep range, then there's a good chance that these improvements are mainly due to your muscle getting bigger and thus being able to produce more force. And this is especially true of isolation exercises like a bicep curl, because they have a really low skill component. Just remember to keep your technique consistent and not just cut the range of motion short or do something else just in order to get more reps. Also, rather than pushing for PRs, you should let your PRs come to you. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're doing a pull-up and you managed to get 8 repetitions, but you could have done one more if you wanted to. If 3 weeks later you do 9 repetitions, but you couldn't have gotten one more repetition even if your life depended on it, then that doesn't really mean that you've gotten any stronger or your muscles have gotten any bigger. It basically just means that you tried a little bit harder than 3 weeks ago. But if your training is set up in the correct way and your nutrition and recovery is also on point, then over time you should be seeing progress in your strength. If you're in a fat loss phase and thus in a calorie deficit, then it's going to be a lot harder to improve your strength and to build muscle, especially if you're more experienced or if you're a leaner individual. And in that case, your main goal should be to maintain your strength, to make sure that you maintain your muscle mass and mainly lose body fat. How quickly you're able to increase your rep strength if you're in a muscle gain phase will depend on how experienced you are. So if you're a beginner, you should normally be able to adapt from workout to workout, Whereas if you're a more experienced individual, then it will take a lot longer than that. And if you're weighing yourself regularly and you're tracking your gym performance, then that is probably sufficient to know if you're either gaining muscle or losing body fat. However, there are two more methods that I think are useful, and one of them is taking body measurements. This can be a valuable tool, especially with beginners, as they can build muscle pretty quickly at first, and changes in your scale weight won't always reflect on the ratio of muscle to fat mass that you've built. A good example for that is someone who we would call skinny fat. So these are people that aren't overweight, maybe they're even underweight, but they still carry a substantial amount of body fat. In that case, they would just eat at maintenance calories and train hard, and they could still build quite a lot of muscle while also losing body fat, which is what we would call body recomposition. But because the scale weight isn't changing or not changing a lot, that can be a little bit discouraging. They don't really know if what they are doing is correct or not. But if over the weeks the stomach measurements have dropped and the rep strength is also improving, then we can be pretty certain that they're building muscle and losing body fat at the same time. And if you're in a fat loss phase and your weight is dropping, but your measurements of your chest and back, as well as your arms and legs, are staying the same, then there's a good chance that you've kept all of your muscle mass and maybe even built some. And the same thing goes for if you're in a gaining phase and your weight is increasing, but your belly measurements staying the same. That's also a good sign that you're probably putting on mostly muscle. I'd suggest you measure your stomach around your belly button, and then also 3 finger widths below and above your belly button, and then also measure your chest, your arms, your hips, and your thighs. I'd recommend doing that once per week on the same day, and then always use a tape that has a self-tightening mechanism, because that will ensure that the pressure at which you're tightening the tape will be consistent and not influence the readings. Lastly, you can also use visual assessments to measure your progress. And for that, I'd make sure that you take progress pictures once per month. This is obviously super important if you're a physique competitor, but it can also be really helpful if you're an online coach and you want to assess your client's progress. Just always make sure that the lighting is always the same, because that can really influence the way that pictures look. So what you want to do is face towards the light source. So maybe that's a ceiling light, and then either have someone else or just your tripod standing between you and the light, and then just take the pictures from there. Probably best to use pictures in a fat loss phase and if you're pretty lean already, because otherwise you won't really see any significant changes. And so if you're not already lean and you're not doing the fat loss phase, then probably just take pictures every couple of months if you want to take any pictures at all. And then always remember that visual assessments, so progress pictures, the way you look in the mirror or the way your clothes fit, they're really subjective. So you should only use them in combination with more quantitative assessments like your scale weight and your gym performance. Now, there are a couple of other tools that often get used for measuring your body composition, like for instance a DEXA scan, skin fold measurements, or biological impedance analysis. But in my opinion, none of them really are worth doing, at least not regularly. First of all, none of them measure your muscle mass anywhere close to accurate, so they should only be used for body fat testing. And then they also have quite a high degree of error as well for body fat testing. So what could happen is that the measurement might show that you have lost body fat, even though in reality you've gained body fat, or vice versa. So it could let you think that you've made progress or not made progress, even though the opposite is true. A DEXA scan is probably the most accurate out of these, but then it's also super expensive. So I'd say unless you've got money to burn, it's probably not worth doing. And even if you want to take a DEXA, just do it once or twice per year. That's more than enough. And then biological impedance analysis has a high degree of error. So unless you've lost a lot of weight, I'd say don't do it at all. And skin fold measurements can be accurate, but only if they're done by a highly skilled professional, which not a lot of people are. So it's probably also not worth doing at all. So in summary, I'd recommend you focus mainly on body weight changes and your gym performance, while maybe also taking body measurements once per week and progress pictures once per month. Anything else probably isn't necessary and could potentially even be harmful if it gives you the wrong data. Just focus on being consistent with your nutrition while also slowly progressing your training, which I've made a whole video about, so be sure to check that out as well. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like this video if this was helpful for you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.